So the movement of the will comes from various sources. First of all, the will can move itself. When the will is presented with a good, the end, a good end, the will doesn't need to be pushed toward that end. It naturally desires the good end. And the reason for that is because the object of the will is always and only goodness itself, universal goodness, absolute goodness. And so anytime the will is presented with a good that's particular, which means a good under a certain aspect, under a certain regard, in a certain manner, the will move itself. It will be drawn toward that good thing. St. Thomas also says that the intellect moves the will. And this is because the intellect presents to the will's blind in and of itself, so the intellect presents to the will a true and a real thing as good. So the intellect moves the will by showing something good to the will. So the intellect can move the will as well. Thirdly, Thomas notes that emotions, or what he calls the passions, can move the will as well. Now, passions, emotions always involve an element, an act of the soul, but also acts of the body. So if we experience things that we sense with our bodies that excite us or we want, like food, like drink, that creates a change in our body. Just like when we smell a good meal, sometimes the joke is you'll begin to salivate. And at times, if we encounter something that we perceive as a threat to goodness, an evil presence, a rabid dog, an angry attacker, that also creates a physiological bodily response. And so when the emotions have these physiological bodily responses, the will and the intellect can take note of the change in the body. And the intellect and the will can determine whether or not this is a good change or not. And if, for instance, a rabid dog approaches me and my body, my senses, my emotions, involuntarily, naturally react with a certain fear, my intellect and will take a look at the situation and say, yeah, it's good that you feel afraid, and in fact now the will is going to choose the good of getting away from that animal as soon as possible. So the emotions also can move the will. And finally, and most importantly, St. Thomas observes that God can move the will. And this is very interesting. The will moves itself, the intellect can move the will, emotions can move the will, but God, above all, can move the will in a profound and powerful and gentle and efficacious way, because God can enter into the deepest recesses of the spiritual power of the will and move us without compromising freedom. So of the four things Thomas says, he says the will is moved by itself when presented with goodness. It's moved by the intellect when the intellect presents a true, something real, something true, something truly good before it. The will is also moved by emotions, by passions. And finally, and most profoundly, the will is moved by God, who enters and sustains the deepest, all parts of the human person.